Welcome to Teens Are Watching, a series brought to you by the Center for Scholars and Storytellers at UCLA. In this series, we will be having teens from all over the country discussing different topics and how they are used and portrayed in the media. This series is meant to uplift the teen voice in conversations directly related to their everyday lives.
Hi everyone, I'm Paige Snepp. I'm 18 and I'm from Los Angeles, and I am an intern at the Center for Scholars and Storytellers. Thanks for tuning in to our latest episode of Teens Are Watching. I am so excited to be the moderator for this incredible group of teens. Today we will be exploring the ins and outs of queer representation in the media. Before we get started, let's introduce our teens. First off, we have Ellie.
Hi, I'm Ellie. I am 16 years old. I am from Northern California, and I am a rising junior in high school. And I'm really excited to be here because I really love doing theater, and I believe that the entertainment industry has a lot of power in how we as a society view different groups of people.
Thanks, Ellie. Let's go with Ranier.
Hello, I'm Ranier. I'm 14 years old. I'm from Berkeley, California, and I'm going into 9th grade. I am here because it seemed interesting.
All right, thanks, Ranier. Let's go to Ella.
Hi, I'm Ella. I'm 15. I'm from Illinois, and I'm currently going to be a sophomore in high school. I really love Little Women and Greta Gerwig films, but they really influenced me in a way that not a lot of media has, and I think that's important to examine.
Great, and let's finish with Alexis.
Hi, I'm Alexis. I am 16, and I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. I am currently a rising junior in high school, and I'm really excited to be here because I was really influenced by a lot of media, especially like Harry Potter and stuff as a young child, and I really do care about representation and how it affects our society.
All right, nice to meet you all. Let's just jump right in and let's go to our first question. So our first question is, do you feel that there are any unhelpful patterns that TV shows and movies fall into when they portray queer youth? Who would like to start? Why don't we go with Ella?
Okay, I think that there are a couple stereotypes that are really damaging to the queer community. The one on top of my head is like the best gay friend, the gay best friend. Yeah, because it's just so tokenizing and it makes like gay people, especially gay men, out to be just like a companion for the main straight character and like a more like a toy or an object used to enhance the main character's plot line. So I think that's really awful. And I also do not like the mean lesbian stereotype, which just makes lesbians seem to be like awful, evil people. And I think that those are the two main ones that I've experienced a lot in media and I've noticed have been damaging in real life.
I guess another thing that I was going to say, not really damaging, but it's not entirely accurate, which is that like a lot of people, like especially like gay or lesbian people in general, are like totally throwing themselves into like the stereotype and wearing like a rainbow and like being like, for like gay men in particular, being like really like feminine and just like being all like super stereotypical, which isn't always true. They're just like a normal person a lot of the time.
Something that I've noticed is this is less about a specific stereotype that is portrayed often, but I think I've seen more and more as TV shows try and claim that they have representation is they'll have a queer character, but the queer character is like a super small part. They're a supporting character in the show, and it feels like these characters are created to more check a box and claim that there's representation. And I think it's really important for TV shows and movies, if you're going to create a queer character, make sure that you're doing it accurately and not just to check a box.
I totally agree with that, because like it either feels like they're the gay character, like the gay best friend, their whole personality is just being gay, or they're just a random character on the side. Like I remember, I think in the last Star Wars movie or something, there's a scene where two random extra women kiss, and Disney was touting that as like so much queer representation. I'm like, that's not representation at all. That's literally like 2 seconds in film.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that, well, first of all, that last example, I'd say that goes with Disney's whole thing. They do a lot of queer baiting, which is when they, they kind of hint that someone is part of the community, and they usually give them negative attributes such as, like Scar, and they're all really bad people or animals, I guess, and they just, a lot of bad qualities are associated with being gay or queer. So yeah, that's one thing. And I feel like there are a few more unhelpful patterns I've noticed. Just one of them is a lot of the time stories focus on like a lot of white queer representation. And that's actually changing. I read a study that as of 2021, because of the pandemic, a lot more queer and people of color representation has increased. But just like in my normal viewing, I don't really see that in teen oriented shows. And and another pattern would be probably, the really strong orientation towards, gay, bisexual, and trans storylines. There's not so much focus on, asexuality or intersexuality. Is that what that's called? Yeah, being intersex. And there's a lot more to the community that I feel like could be explored a lot further. So, yeah. Any last thoughts before we move on to our next question?
Sorry.
You can go.
Okay, I just wanted to make a point on the Star Wars thing, because I think it's really interesting that Disney queer baited Poe and Finn for like 3 movies, and both of the actors for Poe and Finn actually pushed to get their characters to be in a relationship, and they publicly stated that they would like it. But instead, Disney just put like 2 women kissing at the end, which could be easily censored to send to other places. So they haven't done a really good job at giving good queer representation, but they like the progressive points that it gives them.
Yeah,
I was just that whole issue of. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think you brought up like queer coding and how negative traits are often associated with like queer appearing villains or whatever. And there's this total stereotype of like the tortured gay or like the gay villain or murderer that I've seen, or trans, like in Silence of the Lambs, for example, which I think is really problematic because it just totally associates negative stereotypes, as you said.
Yeah. And I think there's that whole issue that Ella brought up about marketing. It is really important to a lot of, especially movie makers, because I feel like TV shows might be more popular locally, but for movie makers, they really want to sell overseas. And for countries that, aren't really supportive of the queer community, it's not going to sell. So, yeah. Why don't we move on to our next question, which is, do you believe that shows should focus more on the daily struggles of queer youth or specific points of crisis, such as coming out? So who would like to start?
I could start. I think in my experience, I've seen a lot of movies and shows focus on points of crisis, such as coming out. And I think I do agree that that's really important, because coming out is a really big experience. But I think that they should start to focus more on just the daily lives and like struggles of the queer community. And one show that I kind of thought about when I heard this question is Schitt's Creek. And there's this character on the show, David, who when the show begins, David has already come out to his family, and his family already accepts him. And so his plot and his character arc is he gets to be so much more than just coming out. And then I think about a movie like Love, Simon. The whole movie is kind of about Simon having the courage to come out. So I think while that's really important to showcase that, because it is an experience that queer youth have to go through, I think sometimes, as a queer person, you want to see the daily lives of these people, because it's about so much more than coming out.
Yeah, just going off of that, I totally agree with you. I think that it is a lot more than just coming out, and I especially would like to see more storylines involving like older, like post-teens, 20s queer people, so you can see that it's not just these points of crisis, it's like life goes on past that point, and how do you navigate life as a queer person once you've passed that adolescent inflection point where everything is changing for you.
Yeah, and also about the about it being mostly about like teens and stuff. A lot of times people will think that's just like, oh, they're like kind of going through a phase. At least that's what I've heard from a lot of people, is that like that's not actually who they are. And it's cool to see if they like growing up past that, staying as like the same person, you know.
I definitely
Yeah, that's a really
agree.
good point.
I mean, I think also that, at least in my personal experience, coming out is kind of a continuous process. So, like, if you come out to your family, you still might have to come out to your workplace or at school. And so I think a lot of the times the media will just treat it as like, oh, one big coming out and then everybody knows. But in real life, like, that's just not really what happens.
Yeah, and also a lot of times it's hard for people to, especially if you change your pronouns, it's hard for people to remember. So you have to correct them a lot, which is, I guess, also part of the process. And yeah, a lot of times people, especially in shows, they have people come out, and then the problem isn't that they're like nervous to come out, it's that their family or their peers don't accept them, which I haven't really seen as a problem. Usually people are fine with like people with you being like queer, but and it's more of a problem that you're just kind of nervous to say it.
I think like a huge problem that I see in a lot of media is this trope of a gay relationship, and one of them is still in the closet because of homophobic parents, but their partner is like trying to force them out of the closet. And I think that's just such a damaging thing to show queer youth, that you have to come out of the closet to be happy, because that's not entirely true. I mean, the one that I can think of off the top of my head is the Prom movie, where the whole plot centers around how this main character's girlfriend can't come out because her mom is extremely homophobic, but they frame it as if it's a bad thing, and that's not entirely fair to either character. So
I definitely think. Oh yeah, you can go ahead. My thing's a little
okay.
off topic, so you can go. Yeah, I was just gonna say that sometimes it's not safe for people to come out, and sometimes like things don't go well and people get, cut off from their families and stuff. And I don't think that's portrayed a whole lot. And I think it should be like seen as okay to be in the closet for your own safety and mental health.
I don't agree with that. A lot of shows do exactly the opposite of what you said, where they actually have it in such a way that the parents, like one of you was saying, the parents don't accept it and they come out anyway, and then it turns out to not be safe, and they end up getting like disowned by their parents or something.
Yeah, I guess I just haven't seen as much. From the ones I've seen, it all ends up being like kumbaya, but yeah, that's Disney. Yeah. Something that I kind of going back to the question, I think when shows and movies make it all about the coming out, it tends to kind of define these queer characters by their sexuality. And I think if you want to have accurate representation, you know, the sexuality or the orientation of these characters is really important, and it's part of their identity, but it's not the only part. And I think that's something that kind of back to the first question, even like TV shows kind of tend to make queer characters only personality trait how they identify. And I think also the question said, should TV shows and movies focus on coming out or the daily struggles? And I think, you know, not necessarily should they focus on the daily struggles, but also just kind of their lives, which after coming out could include feelings of liberation and joy. And I think, you know, that's really important for shows to focus on too, because the struggles are really important. But oftentimes after coming out, and even if someone is not out, their lives can include so much positive that I feel like could also be represented more.
Well, yeah, also like fixing the issue of their only personality trait being that, you know, their sexuality. They could like show stuff, like you said, other than just the daily struggles. Like they could show normal parts of their life, so they actually have other like traits that define them.
And also, I think that if we want to increase more like people to be more accepting of the queer community, I think that's a really important step for show creators to take, because when you make queer characters accurate and you make them people and human, that's when more people start to accept them.
Yeah, I think in response to that, I just wanted to add that I think that that's important, but at the same time, like I think some show creators might focus on the palatability of such characters so that their queerness may be pushed to the side. And even though it's not all that they are, it is definitely, I'd say, it does define someone's life and their experiences. And I feel as though just staying true to representing the people that, you know, that are watching the show, as well as, you know, not just trying to increase acceptance, but also just making their audience feel seen at the same time, is central to the mission of representation. Yeah, do you guys want to move on to the next one? Okay, great. So our next question is, how do stereotypes shown in movies and TV shows affect the way society sees queer people?
Well, kind of going to what I was saying in the first question, which is sort of like, it's not really an issue. It's just like people say you have a queer character, like they're like totally thrust into it and being like I said, they're wearing like all like rainbow and they're like super stereotypical. And I don't know, it's just like not entirely accurate. Like a lot of my queer friends are completely like, you wouldn't know unless they told you. Like they're just normal people.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I feel as though it's like marketing gay and queer into an aesthetic almost, like the exuberance, the fabulousness, just the all around, you know, that they like to make it easily packageable into something that is, you know, accepted by the general audience, but it's in a way that might alienate queer people who don't really fit those boxes. And, you know, if you don't fit that image of aesthetic perfection, if you don't fit that image of a bubbly personality and whatnot, I feel like it can be really hard to relate to some of these queer characters, even though they might go through some of the same struggles that you do. So yeah, Ranier, I totally agree that I think that whole stereotype of personalities, like gay personalities, is pretty harmful to the community. Not harmful, but just not as helpful as it could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting tidbit of history, but there was actually a code, I think it's called the Hayes Code, that specifically basically stated that like gay people, like your gay characters either had to like die or like suffer some really tragic fate. And so it's actually intentional that these stereotypes can be harmful. And it's not around anymore, obviously, but it was an intentional like homophobic thing to create these harmful negative stereotypes that affected the way real queer people were perceived in their lives.
Yeah, I think it also wasn't just making them suffer. It was branding them as bad in some way, because there was such a strong, distrust of queer people. They were really seen as other back in, I think it was early 20th century when that was a thing. So yeah, it's a good thing to bring up.
And there's like the bury your gays trope where all gay characters die at the end. And like even some of my favorite queer media falls into that. And it's really just because of that time when that was a thing, but also because there was an inherent dislike of queer people, and like showrunners and media writers wanted to make them suffer.
Yeah, and I think that goes back into that whole, like literally goes back into the whole thing of it's a phase, because the characters literally die at the end. There's a sense of discontinuity between everything that's been built on these characters, and then they're just cut short. I feel like that literally symbolizes the idea that being gay is a phase and it's dangerous, and there's a risk to living this lifestyle. And some parents might look at that and say, like, it is just a phase because my kid's gonna get killed by somebody who hates them or something. So,
or they just don't think that that's what their kid truly feels like and like how they are, and they don't think that they're gonna stay that way, so they don't bother like getting, like, say if you are like transgender and you change your pronouns, like they might not feel like that's who you really are, so they don't bother getting used to it because they think, oh, you're just gonna change back. It's just like something you're going through.
Yeah, I also, this isn't quite related to the question, but with the issue of like accurate representation, I think a lot of the time cis actors are playing trans people and straight actors are playing gay people, gay characters. And so those stereotypes like that these people who aren't part of the community have in their head get translated through the characters. And that can also be really damaging.
Yeah.
I think that's also, sorry, you can go.
Okay. I think something to say about that is, oftentimes people in theater and in movies are cast as a different sexuality than the one that they identify as. I think that's not necessarily true with like cis versus trans actors, but I think that when that gets complicated is when a character is an example of a lot of stereotypes, because I think when that happens and a straight actor is playing a gay actor, then it feels kind of tone deaf. And so I think although it is normal for straight actors and gay actors to kind of play different sexualities, when that happens, I think just being conscious of if any harmful stereotypes are like being demonstrated is something that's really important.
Yeah, I remember I watched like The Danish Girl, and that was a trans woman being portrayed by Eddie Redmayne. And it just really, even though it was like beautifully acted and it's trans history, it still just left an extremely bad taste in my mouth, because it was like this guy is not trans, and you can do all the research you want, but being trans is like, I feel like that is very hard to portray if you are not trans yourself. And yeah, I just feel like they could have really gotten a trans actor for that. There are so many waiting to be cast who won't be cast anywhere else. And one of the few roles that could have gone to a trans actor went to Eddie Redmayne, a cis guy. So
I think it all goes back to who's in the writers' room, because if you have queer people, if you have trans people writing movies, writing TV shows, they will cast queer people, or they'll cast the best people for the job, and they'll write non-stereotypical roles. I think the main one for me that I remember is She-Ra and the Princess of Power, which was written by Noelle Stevenson, who is a gender fluid lesbian. And they made like a point to cast trans people for trans roles and gay people for gay roles, and it just made the show like 10 times better.
Yeah, that actually goes into the next question, which is how should show creators decrease stigma and normalize the queer experience?
Well, I mean, yeah, like Ella was saying. I can't see your name. Okay, anyway, like you were saying, yeah, like if they just cast like the right people for the right roles, it would just make it better. It just, if it fits in properly.
Yeah, I mean, I think do your research. If you are a straight or cisgender writer and you want to have a queer character in your story, that's okay. But just understand that you do have biases and that you should, consult with actual queer people and make sure and do your very best to try not to fall into these stereotypes.
Yeah, and I think it goes just beyond stereotypes too. I mean, if we're normalizing the queer experience as a whole, I think it's not enough just to focus on, the traditionally portrayed communities, as I mentioned earlier, such as gay and bisexual and transgender. There are a lot more communities that can be represented, and I feel like the more that media pushes the envelope and says that we are going to portray these people, they are not, other, they do exist. I feel like then it is much easier to transition acceptance into politics and just other aspects of life that affect these communities. So I really feel like increasing writers and actors from communities beyond the ones that are traditionally portrayed would really do great things for the queer community.
I think it's important to remember also that queer people are almost always white and in television and in movies, and like the LGBT community does not exist without Black trans people and without queer people of color, and that is neglected a lot. And I think in order to have good representation, you have to represent POC.
Definitely.
Yeah, and just going off of that, I feel like there are a lot of issues that where race and your sexuality or, gender identification, they intersect. And so I feel like portraying more of these like person of color stories, queer person of color stories, like you can show that intersection more and how those kind of people deal with issues, because I feel like it's very difficult if you're, Black or Latino and you're queer. I feel like the issues that you go through are very different from a white queer person.
Yeah, I mean, speaking from personal experience, I identify as asexual, and I think the only time I've ever heard that mentioned like on screen would be in the show Sex Education, and that was like a pretty brief thing. But I just never see characters like me on screen, like Asian queer people. I can't think of a time that I've seen that.
Yeah, as an Asian, I think it's especially important that Asian asexuals appear on screen because we're so often hypersexualized, and I think it'd be really refreshing to see that specifically portrayed on screen. So I hope that works out.
I think I'm an Indian lesbian, so like there's not Indian representation on screen at all, but then you throw in queer and it's like it's non-existent. My friend recommended a book to me yesterday that has a desi queer protagonist, and I like almost started crying because I've never seen that before, and I've never been able to be fully represented almost ever.
All right. With that, do we want to move on to the unstructured section where we can discuss anything? So, want to ask you guys just any thoughts at all. We don't have to, switch off, just say whatever pops into your head.
What are your guys' favorite shows with good queer representation?
I don't really watch a lot of stuff with queer representation, or just in general. I don't watch a lot of things.
One show that I've been watching recently because season 2 just came out is Love, Victor, which is a spin-off of Love, Simon, but it's a TV show. And something that I really love about the show is Victor doesn't start off knowing what his sexuality is. He kind of has to figure it out along the way. And I think that was, showing questioning is very valid. And I think it was really awesome for me to get to see that. And also I think, when a show has a first season and then a second season, something that maybe makes it easier for shows as compared to movies is the first season for Love, Victor was about him coming out. And then the second season is all about him kind of going through his life and a relationship. And so I think that was just something that I really loved seeing because it wasn't just about the coming out.
Yeah, about questioning, I was actually going to mention that. I think that questioning isn't portrayed on screen that much, and I'd really like to see more. Just like sometimes it seems like characters like really just know they're gay or they're trans. Like I used to play with dolls, I used to do this and that, and it's very clear to them. But I feel like so much of the time people might go to being non-binary or gender fluid, and then finding another identity that is they more closely align with. And so I feel like they should really keep that in mind, but at the same time don't invalidate non-binary and genderqueer people. But yeah, I really want to see more of that questioning.
Well, yeah, the thing about like questioning is that sometimes people will think there's something and come out to like their parents and their friends, and then they it might change, or they might like not feel right with that, and they might have to come out more than once.
Yeah, I think. Well, I mentioned sex education already. If we're going back to shows, but I liked that because it was really casual about its like queer representation, and that it was just like, oh yeah, they're lesbian, okay, or like one of the characters, it's not even stated like what exactly they identify as, but they've been in relationships with both men and women, and it's just not like super in your face, but it's also very educational.
I think the character sorry, go ahead.
I think sex education is such a great example because it really normalizes it, and these queer characters, they aren't othered at all. They're just going about their lives as the queer people that they are. And I just think that's like such a great example.
Yeah, I really like sex education because it portrays a lot of queer joy. I think someone mentioned earlier, but seeing so much of like that acceptance and living authentically, and even less of like that trauma of coming out or being outed and all of that. It made me feel really good at seeing it. And also they were just kind of layered on the information and resources about living as a queer person. They hid that as therapy or advice from the characters, but in reality they were kind of just giving teens watching some actual advice about how to live as a queer person, which I thought was genius and great.
Yeah, and another thing that I think is really cool, which I don't know what it's called, but it's like talking to like real people, not actors, just real people that like the show's about. They're basically just interviewing people or like filming people, but like their actual lives. So it's not like a staged thing. It's like they're just talking to people that are actually like queer or gay or whatever, which is cool. Like it shows like how it is.
Kind of like documentary style or something.
Yeah, that's what it's called.
A show that I really, really love is called Black Monday, and it has a super, super diverse cast. Like, everyone in that cast is a minority, which is really refreshing to see. And the queer characters on there, like, it is set in the 80s, so their stories are set with somewhat gravity, but like they also just get to be happy and they get to experience relationships the way anyone would. And it's just really refreshing to see that. And especially they're just treated like every other character.
Sorry, I just dropped out for like a minute.
Yeah. Okay. Wait, I had an idea. Oh yeah. Another thing I really like seeing is like queer representation, not just in like, realistic fiction or like slice of life things, but in fantasy and in other genres. I think that's really, I always just feel really good when I see like, a queer person in a fantasy film or something, because you just don't see it that often.
Well, yeah, because usually that's not what it's like focused and centered around. But if they still try to include it and it like actually include it, not like the Disney example, but like when you actually like see it as like a real thing, it's just cool.
Something that comes to mind, this isn't quite fantasy, I guess you could say it's historical fiction. But in Bridgerton, I remember there is a gay character. And I think seeing examples of the queer community in historical film or television is really awesome because, I think there's this sense sometimes that the queer community is this new thing, but it's actually, been around for quite a long time. And I think just the more that like that representation is shown in movies and TV, it's kind of showing that it's not a phase. It's not something that's new. It's, we've been around for quite a long time. And I know that in Bridgerton, it's the character who is gay is like a smaller character, but I'm interested to see what they do with that character for the future seasons and if any more of the characters will be part of the queer community.
So I have a question for you all. So do you think that, show creators should focus more on, increasing the diversity of their representation? So just like including more identities, trying to fit their storylines in, or they should, hone in on, like one identity or one part of the community and really try to deeply portray their experiences? Like, do these cancel out? What do you guys think?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I mean, I think, especially with like movies, I think it's easier to focus on one identity just because you have a shorter amount of time and they're just structured differently. While with shows, you can have a bigger cast of ensemble characters. So, I mean, my inclination is to say we need both.
Yeah, I agree. I think it might be difficult and it might be seen as like tokenization or kind of like a cash grab to kind of include as many identities as possible. But as I said, it's like it's necessary and it's a necessary part of just increasing awareness first. I guess that's not the best kind of representation, but right now I feel like there's basically nothing. And I really want to see people get not adventurous, but, take a risk in portraying, things that haven't really been portrayed before. So, yeah.
I think it is hard for shows and movies to portray all of the different identities, but I think like what Paige was saying earlier, I've pretty much never seen any intersex representation in any kind of media. And I think, maybe focusing, you can't represent all identities probably in one show or one movie, but focusing maybe on the ones that haven't been represented as much in the past, because I think people need to see those. And also, I think, at the same time, kind of making sure that you do a deep and accurate and like true portrayal of whatever identity that is.
I think a really good example of this kind of idea is two Ryan Murphy shows, which is Glee and Pose, which both have like Glee obviously has like a variety of queer representation, while Pose really focuses in on like specifically gay and trans Black people in the 80s. And like Glee is bad, but not because of their representation. It's just a bad show. But they were able to make a lot of strides, especially in that time, while Pose now is making a lot of strides. And I think that's really interesting that both of them made impacts and they showed different things.
Okay, do you guys have any closing thoughts on this? Any questions for the group? Okay, cool. So what are you guys watching right now?
Nothing.
I just finished watching New Girl.
Oh my God.
Okay, I'm gonna be honest. I think it's overhyped. I didn't like it that much. I watched like all 7 seasons and it was not that good. So, but I don't have a show right now, unfortunately.
I love New Girl. I don't know, but it's not for everyone. So I just love it. But I just finished season 2 of Love, Victor, and I'm currently watching Lucifer. I'm not watching
right now.
anything
I'm kind of
currently. I just finished Shadow and Bone on Netflix.
It's really good.
I liked that one.
It's
Read the
good.
books first.
But
about that.
Yeah, I don't think I'm watching anything right now.
I am rewatching Sex Education because it is cute. Yep. Okay. So any other thoughts? Anybody?
I mean,
Nope.
if we could
Oh.
talk briefly about like other social media platforms. I don't know. That's opening up a whole nother can of worms, but I just
Yeah, go
remember
ahead.
how like, TikTok and stuff has really opened up a lot of like discourse and between like young people about, queer identities, and it can sometimes be a little bit problematic, but I think that show creators could look to those platforms as well to see what queer youth are actually doing.
I think with social media, there's the whole topic of celebrities queer baiting, and I just think that's like another, kind of like with Disney, celebrities will kind of hint that they might be part of the queer community without actually, without.
Yeah.
Are we talking about
yeah.
Billie Eilish right now?
I have mixed feelings about that because on one hand, it's like you shouldn't force anyone to come out, right? But on the other hand, it's like you are a public figure and you know what you're doing. So it's like
I think it was just made all the worse that she's dating like this 30-year-old homophobic racist Trump supporter. It's like I feel like I was fine with like the video. I saw it. I didn't think it was that much queer baiting. I thought it was just like her hanging out with friends. But then like it's just the weird irony of her dating like this awful person.
Yeah. I mean, I think oh, go ahead.
I think I wasn't necessarily referring to like that specific one example, but I think it's just kind of interesting how celebrities and like the entertainment industry will try and profit off of the queer community without actually supporting them fully. And I think that's definitely something that should change because it's not good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like especially with women, a lot of the times being seen as like bi or gay is an aesthetic, and that's kind of not cool.
I think also with bi people in general, it's just the idea that they're just super sexual and that's why they're bi. It's kind of invalidating the identity, or that bi people are more likely to cheat, which is just not true. So I think there are, kind of making sure that the entertainment industry doesn't kind of further those stereotypes.
I think all queer women are hypersexualized in media, especially because men, for some reason, find it really attractive when two women kiss each other. And so it's like lesbians are super hypersexualized, bi people are super hypersexualized, and it's really just misogyny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also I feel like if you're a bi woman, it's really not seen as legitimate. It's always seen as like you're gonna come back to a man eventually. And I feel like out of all identities, being a bi woman and lesbian woman, it's very difficult because people constantly doubt, your attraction to women.
Yeah. I read an article recently about like pointing out moments in shows where like biphobia was really apparent, and it's like surprising. Like there were moments on Glee in these like big shows. So yeah, that's something that definitely needs to change.
Also, kind of the opposite of what Paige was saying. People that say they're bi, but like aren't really.
I have mixed feelings on that one because like
me too.
Because I don't want to just like say like they're not, but like I don't know, it's just like completely. Like
being queer is not an aesthetic, but at the same time, everyone is valid, and you are valid with whatever label you choose for yourself. It's really complicated.
But people that like say you're a guy and you say you're bi, but you like only date women ever, and like that is a thing. But like I don't want to just like say that's not like something they can do. But
you could have a preference if you're bi.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. You guys have any other thoughts?
I'm hungry.
All right. Well, then with that, I hope you get a sandwich or something. And thank you guys so much for joining me today to talk about this really important topic. This is just the second episode in an ongoing series. So follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook for the Center for Scholars and Storytellers. I am Paige Snepp. Thank you.